anything that Ms. Ellis would like to speak?
I just want to say I apologize. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, you can be seated. Thank you.
There it was, an apology from Bionca Ellis, albeit a very short and concise apology. Don't know how meaningful it will be to the Wood family, but nonetheless an apology at her sentencing. Welcome back to Court TV Live. This morning is all about justice for 3-year-old Julian Wood and his mother, Margot Wood, as they were both stabbed at a popular grocery store parking lot in broad daylight. It's time now for convicted killer Bionca Ellis to learn her fate.
And therefore, I urgently implore our city and county leaders to continue providing facilities and programs that respond quickly and compassionately to those in crisis. The need is dire now than far too many of us realize. The leaders in this county have been discussing this topic for far too long. Please get it done. No family should have to lose a child, and no family should have to watch their loved ones deteriorate because meaningful and effective mental health services were unavailable. The absence of adequate and functioning mental health facilities in our community has tragic consequences. And I call upon our leaders at every level of government to make providing and supporting mental health care a true priority so that others in crisis can be helped before another tragedy occurs. But Ms. Ellis, again, I want to state that while your mental illness was accepted by this jury, it is not an excuse for what you did. The jury found that although you suffer from schizophrenia, you understood the nature and wrongfulness of your actions and handed down their guilty verdict on all charges. When reviewing the sentencing factors as outlined under 29-29-11 and 29-29-12, my job as a judge here is to punish the offender, but also to make sure that the sentence should be proportionate and not demeaning to the seriousness of the offender's conduct and the impact on the victims, and consistent with other sentences with similar crimes. In looking at the seriousness, of course, the child's age and the suffering weigh heavily for this court as well. And so with respect to my sentencing, after taking in consideration all the matters before the court that are appropriate under the principles and purposes of sentencing, the court's going to impose the following sentence. Starting with count 2, as found guilty on count 2 of murder, it's a life with parole eligibility at 15 years. On count 3, the murder charge under the B section, it's life with parole eligibility at 15 years. And those are the maximum sentences that can be handed down on those 2 counts. On count 4, with respect to the Reagan-Toke sentencing guidelines, count 4 and count 8 are both felonies of the 2nd-degree felonious assault. We also speak to count 5, which was the endangering children as a felony of the 2nd degree. And then we speak to count 7 and 6. The state and I have agreed that I will move forward with count 7. Under count 7, under the Reagan-Toke sentencing guidelines on the attempted murder in count 7, the court's going to hand down the maximum sentence of 11 years as the minimum sentence to the indefinite sentence of 16 and a half years. Again, I've outlined the Reagan-Toke guidelines and the reporting requirements for post-release control that will be controlling on all other felonies of the 2nd and 1st degree, this being the highest level. I've outlined the 5 provisions, as I noted for the record already. And then with respect to the count 4 and 8, the maximum sentence is 8 years. I'll hand down that sentence. Count 5, 8 years. Count 6, 11 years. Count 8, 8 years. And then as indicted, count 10, which would be a 6-month sentence on the misdemeanor charge. Regarding aggravated murder and finding the defendant guilty of aggravated murder by this jury, the court's going to hand down a sentence of life without parole. I'll run every other sentence concurrent to life without parole. Ms. Ellis, you'll be given credit to 509 days of the time that you've served. I'll order you in the custody of the sheriff to transport you to Marysville Correctional Facility. I'll also indicate that fines, fees, and court costs will be waived with respect to this sentence. In addition to the verdict that has been handed down by this jury and the sentence that the court handed down, Ms. Ellis, you have a right to appeal both the sentence and the conviction in this case. You can do that by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk of courts within 30 days of this sentence. If you're unable to pay for the cost of an appeal, you have the right to appeal without payment of costs. If you're unable to obtain counsel for an appeal, I'll appoint counsel to represent you. If you're unable to pay the cost of documents necessary, they are provided to you without cost. You have a right to a notice of appeal filed timely on your behalf. And Ms. Ellis or counsel, do you wish to appeal both the sentence and the conviction handed down in this case?
Yes, Your Honor. No objection for the record and appoint counsel for the objection.
I'll note your objection regarding my sentence, and knowing that she's unable to afford counsel, I'm going to appoint the public defender to represent her with respect to her appeal. Again, noting for the record, all counts will be run concurrent to each other, with the life without parole being count one sentence. I'll waive all fines, fees, and court costs, give her credit for the 509 days that she served, in addition to time while she awaits her transportation to Marysville Correctional Facility for Women. Is there anything further from the state of Ohio before we recess?
No, Your Honor.
Anything on behalf of Ms. Ellis?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we adjourn. Thank you.
And with that, life without parole, the maximum allowable sentence under the law in the state of Ohio, has just been imposed for count number one, the aggravated murder of little Julian Wood. He also maxed her out on the other lower counts. Let's bring in attorney Tommy Pope for some reaction. Tommy, you and I were saying earlier the judge ought to max her out, and he did. What's your reaction?
I tell you, Julie, as we were going through, I was concerned because it sounded like he didn't have the choice, till we reached the end, the choice for life without parole. And the strongest I heard was, life with the 15 eligibility. And it went right through my mind, I guess, because you mentioned the parole hearing for Susan Smith that, 15 years from now, that family was going to be stuck thinking about they would have had a teenager in their house, but they were going to have to go to court, to prison, and so, and contest the parole. And so it is such a relief for that family to know you're not going to have to worry. You focus on your family, you focus on life, and you blot this defendant out of, she becomes a number, and you put her out of the equation. And I think, the mother said she hated her, and that's strong but justified. But we can take that hate and focus on something else. And I think the system took care of this family at this point.
It really did. Well said, Tommy, because this was a just sentence based on the crimes. And the judge very thoughtfully acknowledged how, sure, she was suffering from schizophrenia at the time, but that does not absolve her of criminal liability, because the jury found she knew that stabbing that little boy to death was wrong. So with that, Bionca Ellis is off to prison, and little Julian Wood got some bit of justice with this decision.